Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the LG G Watch R on the left and the Sony SmartWatch 3 on the right. These are two of the latest additions to the Android Wear market, and in my opinion, also two of the most compelling. I'll start off with the LG G Watch R, priced at $300 US. This just launched this past week, and in my opinion, right now, it appears to be the best Android Wear device ever made. It combines some of the best looking hardware with also some of the best functioning hardware. And again, that is a matter of opinion. Some will prefer the Moto 360 design, some will prefer the Sony SmartWatch 3, and I think it's all a matter of where you or how you plan to use and wear your device of choice. But starting off with this one, you have a 320 by 320 res 1.3 inch P circular OLED display. In my opinion, the best you're going to find on any Android Wear device right now. It will outperform traditional IPS displays, as well as just about every other type, including the transflective that's on the Sony that I'll be looking at in a moment. It also has some best-in-class battery life. We're looking at a 410 milliamp battery that, at least in my experience so far, appears to be able to yield at least 2, if not more, days of usage with the screen on constantly, which is mind-numbing, especially since the ambient on screen here is nothing, or excuse me, I should say it blows away the ambient display you're seeing on the right, which is very similar to what you're going to find on just about every other Android Wear device that doesn't use an OLED display. But moving along, underneath the hood we have a quad-core Snapdragon 400 chip complemented by a half gig RAM, 4 gigs of internal storage. We also have a heart rate monitor right here, as well as a magnetic charging system, so you will need to carry around that hub, or at least make sure that you have access to that dock in order to charge this thing up before you're going to get that 2+ days of battery life. But very simple design. I would say, again, the most attractive of any Android Wear device, and that's because it really does look like a typical watch, something that isn't going to stand out and make people wonder what is on your wrist. It's going to blend in and yet provide functionality that a traditional watch could only dream of actually delivering on, and that is the Google Now experience crammed inside of a device like this. Moving on to the smartwatch from Sony. Now, this is their third generation, and Sony has had a good amount of time to grow with this platform, but they've abandoned their own software and gone stock Android Wear like every Android Wear device, and that is a good thing, especially for Sony, because not that they are the best hardware manufacturer out there, but lately they have been putting out some nice stuff, and this is no exception. A 1.6 inch display here rather than the 1.3 inch, also 320 by 320, but we have a transflective display, which means this is going to do very well in bright sunlight. And that is a big advantage when looking at smartwatches, Android Wear devices, because how good is a watch that you can't physically see? Clearly not very good. In terms of form factor, a completely different approach, a more athletic look. This rubber band can be replaced with a lot of different options. Keep in mind this leather band here can also be replaced with pretty much any standard metal or band of your choosing, since it is a standard band type. Here you'll have to go with Sony's replacement bands. This just pops out. Literally, you can see the casing as I go like this. It'll just come out. It is its own independent unit. Charging happens right here, micro USB port, and that's one of the biggest advantages of this watch, in my opinion, is that you can charge with a micro USB cable. That means you don't have to carry around anything special. You've got charging wherever you go, as long as you've got a charger for your smartphone, pretty much, which just about everyone does. Battery life here, the battery is rated at 420, so it's got 10 milliamps over the LG, but because the LG has an OLED display, it does seem to do better on battery life, just as it does with its ambient on screen that you're seeing right now, which is far more readable in just about every context than the one you're looking at here on the Sony, which mirrors also what the Moto 360 does. In fact, the Moto 360, I would argue, is worse than the transflective display that you're looking at here from Sony. In terms of how comfortable these watches are, I would say that it's really, again, a matter of personal preference. This is very easy to clean. You've got a higher durability here, IP68 rating. It's only an IP67 with the G Watch R. And basically what that means is the difference between water resistance and a little bit more of waterproofing. This is going to be submerged. I wouldn't recommend submerging the LG. The LG can get wet, but this thing, the rubber band tells you everything you need to know. You could actually go swimming with this as long as you're not going for too long and get away with it, or too deep. It's not a diving watch. Clearly, it's not going to survive that. I do like the clasp system here, and in my review I mentioned it's very easy to take on and off, which is nice. It's actually easier than a traditional leather band like we have here or on the 360, but it also is a little bit loose. You can see there's a little bit of give there, and that little bit of give isn't the most reassuring thing when you're walking around with essentially a dated smartphone on your wrist that you want to make sure doesn't fall off, come off, or have any problems. But otherwise, functionality on these devices is pretty much a wash. They both are going to give you access to the exact same sort of information. It's all tied to your Google Now experience. So your calendar, your timers, your alarms, you can do searches using your voice. Voice commands drive both of these devices, and that's the next thing I want to get to. But I didn't round out specifications here, and I'm sorry for not doing that. The Sony I mentioned has a larger battery, pretty much, again, a very similar quad-core processor. It's an ARM chip, an A7, clocked at, I think, 1.2 gigahertz. And then you've got 4 gigs of internal storage, GPS, no heart rate monitor on this, which I think was a bit of a miss on Sony's behalf. I think that considering it's got the more athletic look and feel, and it definitely looks like something you'd rather wear to the gym, whereas this could go just about anywhere, arguably, there really maybe should have been a heart rate monitor on here, even though many phones already have heart rate monitors, and of course you can make the argument you don't really even need it on a smartwatch because that's not its goal. It's just an element of its function. The real goal is being the gatekeeper for your content or what you should access on your smartphone. And both of these do that very, very well. In fact, they do it, I would say, almost identically. It's just in different form factors. And some have made the argument that you want to go with the square face type because that's what Android Wear is optimized to right now. And they aren't wrong. Let me reiterate that. That is not incorrect. But in terms of whether or not it's actually a necessity, I don't find really any disadvantage to the circular display. Yes, there's a little bit less screen real estate. Some things will get clipped. But otherwise, the actual capability of the device is exactly the same as long as the internal specifications, again, the RAM, the processor, are all there to back up the user interface, the actual OS, the platform. And the G Watch R has exactly that. So whether I'm looking at, Reddit here, which is, see that interesting news there, but the Reddit app, because there are so many third-party apps, by the way, for this. You can see the launcher coming up right here. There's just a wealth of things that you can already do with this platform, so I can only imagine what it's going to evolve into over the course of time. And since both of these are so closely spec'd in terms of what they actually have on board, in terms of the processor, the RAM, the battery, it's really just the heart rate monitor and styling. A lot of people are going to be hard-pressed to make a decision between these two because they are separated by $50. And I think the convenience of micro USB charging here is also a major selling point, especially when you look at the Moto 360 smartwatch or Android Wear device that needs its own Qi dock to come along with it, or you've got to have a Qi dock certified somewhere else. Here, a similar situation, you need that magnetic dock for this to charge, which is even more proprietary in a sense because, quite frankly, you could have a Qi dock anywhere that the Moto 360 could charge off of. Here, you actually need that piece, which does rely on a micro USB cable to charge it. So I wish they would have integrated micro USB, but if it would have compromised design in any way, that would have been a step backwards because that's what the LG G Watch R gets. It wasn't as if we didn't already have competent hardware. We do. The 360 was the beginning, the Sony SmartWatch 3 the next step, and a 250 arguably one of the best values in Android Wear right now. I think it's better than the 360, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But then the R, delivers all of that and then some by giving us a design that you don't have to feel like you're wearing a toy or something embarrassing, but really what you're accustomed to as someone who enjoys wearing watches to begin with, because it actually is a nice looking watch that only can get better, of course, since you can customize the face of the watch very easily. It's not like that's going to be a challenge like on any device in Android Wear right now. There are, basically there's a bevy of options here to go through on watch faces, anything you could think of. And there will only be more customizations, more things you can do with this device and every other Android Wear device at that. And at first I thought the 1.6-inch display here was really a winner. But I have to say, the OLED, the higher pixel density, it just wins every single time, like it does pretty much on every display, unless the OLED is of low quality, poor viewing angles, poor whites. It depends on how an OLED itself actually performs. But back to why the SmartWatch 3 is better than the 360, and so is the R. Voice recognition is one of the driving elements of what you're going to do with something like the R or the Sony SmartWatch 3. And the same applies to the Moto 360. One of the big problems the Moto 360 has is that its voice recognition capability through its onboard microphone is pretty poor. And that's not something I've experienced with the Sony SmartWatch 3, thankfully, or the LG Watch R. And that's critical because if I experienced it with either of them, I wouldn't even be able to consider them, because when that's the primary means of communicating, or I should say that is really access to the complete UI and functionality of your Android Wear experience, even though apps can get you around that, that's pretty much a killing, or I should say an end game for a sale for me personally, and should be for you as well. And as much as I love Motorola, at least my unit, as well as every other review that I saw, had trouble interpreting, or I should say transcribing any sort of voice commands. So let me go ahead and give you a sample here. I, of course, have to wake it up first in order to do this. Okay, Google, now, what's my heart rate? And we'll see if it works. Doesn't look like it picked it up. What's my heart rate? It figures it would fail after I was just paying it the compliment, but let's try it again. Give it the benefit of the doubt. Of course, things are launching. That may not be helping. It may be making matters worse. And it looks like it is. And in fact, the G Watch, and this is, I'm going to blame this on third-party stuff getting installed. You can see quick access to settings, that maybe I shouldn't have that installed for review purposes here. It thinks I've left my phone. That app is coming in. So now you see why we're getting some of the interference that we actually are. But let's try again. What's my heart rate? Working, working, working. And even though I'm nowhere near my phone, this still should seamlessly work. It's now saying it's offline, but the heart rate end of things should work without having to be anywhere near. You can see the step counter there. Settings, we can dive into screen brightness. This is what's really nice about the platform, in my opinion. But I'm going to get back to voice recognition. Okay, Google. See if I can get it back up. Okay, Google, what is my heart rate? Now, of course, it's completely seamless, as if the whole event earlier was just a mistake. And of course, it takes a moment, no differently than the Moto 360. And I can assure you, despite the Microsoft blue screen of death example that we just had occur, that I really have had solid accuracy with this. Okay, Google. Go back again. I should have just double tapped. Okay, Google. What's the temperature? You can see it's clearly able to make it out. Okay, Google. Navigate to Madison Square Garden. And I also noticed the range on the Bluetooth connection of this device to my Note 4 is superior. So that's another noteworthy thing I wanted to let all of you know, is that this actually is doing a better job at keeping a connection to the Note 4 at long range distance, for those of you that actually care. And then you can see we have navigation directions right there, ready to take us on our way. Of course, I can back out of that. And really, this is what the experience is all about. So voice recognition has to work in order for any of these devices to perform properly. The good news is that both of these do. Even though you saw it having a problem there, that had more to do with interference from third-party applications. Had I left this thing stock, we wouldn't have seen the interruptions, the problems that were going on there. And I'm not making excuses. It's just what I've experienced with all of the Android Wear devices. Some will call that a beta experience. I mean, it is a beta in theory, but when you see how well this works, how it allows you, again, to filter all of the information, what calls you want to take, what texts you want to respond to. It also ensures that you'll never miss anything with the vibration on wrist, something you could easily miss with a call when your phone's on silent. This doesn't need to be. It's just a great way, again, to enhance and also keep you away from your smartphone, so you're not always staring at it. Voice texting, voice emailing, voice organization of calendar, voice reminders, voice timers, alarms. I mean, these are all things you could do with your phone, but it's a lot easier when you're walking around to just do it with something like this. So while many people still view the smartwatch or Android Wear device as just an impediment or an additional device, redundant one that they don't need because their smartphone does everything that this already can do, I understand where they're coming from. But there is a very large market of consumers that don't want to have to go into their pocket or bag, that want to be able to at least reflect on the fact that the watch has finally been improved over how many years. You put a number on it. I'm not going to, because we actually have something now that looks like a regular watch and actually does so quite well. It's a nice watch if this wasn't a smartwatch, and yet it delivers capability that a smartphone would have delivered on just some years back. So it's really amazing how far we've come, and Android Wear, much like the Android platform itself, is just the beginning for smartwatches like this, and where this whole experience is going to go and develop into, and all of the applications that are going to be developed. It's just all very exciting. And again, in my opinion, both of these are fantastic choices right now. Clearly, the better value is the Sony, especially with the charging capability, even though it's missing the heart rate monitor. And to speak to style, I can't really tell you what's going to be best for you. Obviously, it's a matter of personal preference. To me, the LG G Watch R combines the best of functionality and style, really the best middle ground. But if you're really looking for just a sporty look, and you're not going to be wearing this out to dinner or, going to social events in it, not that it would be wrong to do so with the Sony watch, then the Sony watch is the better pick. If you're looking for something more versatile that really is a go anywhere, I think the LG G Watch R is easily the better pick. And for the extra $50, you are getting, in some elements, superior hardware and features, a little bit more. No GPS here, though, like you're getting with the Sony. Another thing I noticed is that the Sony is not as sensitive to wrist movement in order to wake it up. You can see even right now I'm doing quite a bit of shaking in order to get it to wake up, whereas this, the LG G Watch R, like the Moto 360, very sensitive to hand movement in order to give you basically what it thinks you desire, which is a view of your Android Wear device. So that pretty much rounds things out. I think it's clear already. My favorite right now is the LG G Watch R because, again, it does deliver on both style and performance, something that it does better than any other Android Wear device, at least to date, including the 360 that I reviewed in the past, even though it isn't here today. And the Sony is a very close second. No question about it. More durable, easier charging, no heart rate monitor, comparable battery life, a bigger display, that square display type if you're actually worried about compatibility. But I can assure you, any problems with compatibility, which are very rare, they're going to be addressed in updates. It's fairly obvious considering this is easily going to be the best-selling Android Wear device, in my opinion, as soon as it actually starts to hit store shelves over the course of the next couple of weeks. But that pretty much sums things up. The LG G Watch R is, in my opinion, the way to go if budget is not an option. Otherwise, the Sony is a fantastic pick as well. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.